Have you ever wondered what it's really like to connect two massive continents? To fly from that historic crossroads of Europe and Asia all the way to the capital of China? Well, today we're breaking down that exact journey, a 9-hour, 7,000-kilometer flight on Air China from Istanbul to Beijing.
Okay, let's get right to it. The first question everyone always has: what's this going to cost? As you can see, Air China is pretty competitive on this route. For an economy seat, you're typically looking at somewhere between $650 and $920, which is often a big draw. And of course, if you're thinking about an upgrade, you can see the price jumps for premium economy and business right there. And here's a little snapshot of the trip itself. You're settling in for a proper long-haul flight, clocking in at nearly 9.5 hours. This isn't just some quick hop. You're on a huge Boeing 777, crossing a massive distance to connect two major global hubs. So let's start at the very beginning of the journey, the departure. It all kicks off at the relatively new and absolutely enormous Istanbul airport.
When you first walk in, the thing that just hits you is the scale. I mean, it is one of the largest airport terminals in the world, and that modern, airy design is genuinely impressive. It almost feels like you're in a city of its own. But here's the thing about a place that massive, there's a trade-off. All that space and all those shops mean you gotta plan ahead. Seriously, be prepared for some very long walks to get to your gate, and you'll want to budget a good 30 to 45 minutes just for security, especially if you're flying at a busy time. So yeah, you're definitely going to get your steps in, but despite the walking, the overall experience is top-notch. The airport is just so modern, efficient, and well-organized, which is why it earns a really strong 8.6 out of 10.
Okay, so you've navigated the terminal. Now for the next hurdle, boarding the plane. Look, getting over 300 people onto an aircraft is never going to be super fast. Air China keeps things orderly with their boarding groups, but you just can't get around the fact that it can feel like a pretty slow process. And that feeling is reflected right here in the score. A 7.6 tells you it's perfectly fine, it gets the job done without any chaos, but it's probably not going to be a highlight of your travel day.
So boarding is done, the doors are closed, and you're finally in your seat. Now for the main event, the core of the experience. Let's take a look at what the cabin and the service are like for the next 9 hours.
This is your home for the next 9 hours. Let's break down the specs. You've got the 3-4-3 seating layout, which is pretty much the standard for airlines trying to maximize seats on these big jets. You're looking at about 31 inches of legroom or pitch and a seat width of around 17 inches. Plus, you get the essentials like a USB port and an adjustable headrest. But numbers are just numbers. How does it actually feel? Well, this quote pretty much sums it up perfectly. It's totally acceptable for a long flight, but that 10 across seating arrangement can definitely feel a little tight, especially if you've got a full flight or you're on the taller side. And you can see the direct impact of that tight layout right here in the comfort score. A 7.2 is, it's a passing grade, but it's not fantastic. It clearly points to that feeling of being just a little bit cramped for such a long journey. Thankfully, one of the things that helps break up the long journey is the meal service. You can expect 2 of them. Shortly after you take off, you'll get a full main meal, and then, before you land in Beijing, they serve a lighter meal or breakfast. It's a nice way to mark the time. And what about the food itself? Well, it's actually pretty decent. You'll usually have a choice between a Chinese-style dish and a Western option. It's not exactly gourmet dining, but it's a solid, enjoyable meal to keep you going. And that's reflected in this respectable 7.5 score. It tells you the meal service does its job well. It's reliable, you've got options, and the quality is definitely up to par for economy class. So, you've eaten. How do you pass the other 7 or 8 hours? Well, you've got a personal screen at your seat. The selection of movies and shows is pretty reasonable, with a mix of international blockbusters and Chinese content. The only real downside is that the system's interface can feel a bit clunky and behind the times. And that outdated feel is exactly why the entertainment system gets the lowest rating of all the in-flight services. A 7 out of 10 basically means it works, it'll keep you occupied, but it could really use a modern refresh. 9 hours sounds like forever, but after a movie and a meal, you look out the window and you've crossed Central Asia. Often, you're treated to this amazing sunrise over northern China as you start your descent into Beijing. Once you touch down at Beijing capital, which is one of the busiest airports in Asia, the whole process is generally pretty efficient. Just be ready for a bit of a wait at immigration. It can take anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes to get through, really just depending on how many other flights landed around the same time. So, just like our departure airport in Istanbul, the arrival experience in Beijing also scores really well. An 8.3 reflects a modern, well-run airport that does a great job of handling a massive number of passengers. Okay, so we've covered the entire journey from check-in at one end to baggage claim at the other. It's time to pull back and look at the big picture. What is the final verdict here? This slide really boils it all down, doesn't it? The highlights are pretty clear. You get a very competitive price, the meals are decent, and you've got great connections through the Beijing hub. On the flip side, the weak points are just as clear. That economy seating is tight, the entertainment system is a bit dated, and the boarding process can feel like it drags on. And when we tally up all those individual scores, from the airports, the boarding process, and the entire in-flight experience, we land here at a final, very solid overall score of 7.7 out of 10. A good, but not quite a perfect flight. So in the end, it really all comes down to this one question. Air China gives you a really functional and often very affordable way to fly between Europe and Asia. But the decision is yours. For a 9-hour journey, are the savings you get worth the trade-off in personal space? It's that classic dilemma, price versus comfort. So, what would you choose?